BVR Combat, a new feature in Wings of Glory. Today I'll be teaching you how to do basic BVR combat using the F-14B Tomcat. In today's video, we'll be covering the basics of BVR combat and how to notch and chaff a missile. The basics. The first part of BVR combat is locking your target. This can be done by pressing the middle mouse button a single time. Pressing it twice will deselect the target. Pressing it twice quickly will hard lock the target. Don't do that unless you're using a SAR missile. A SAR missile, or SARH, Semi-Active Radar Homing Missile, is a missile that requires a lock from the launching aircraft. Launching in a hard lock is not good. This notifies the enemy aircraft that you're launching a missile at them. This gives them time to react. Preferably, you would launch in a soft lock. SAR missiles cannot launch in a soft lock mode. This will self-destruct the missile. They have to be launched in a hard lock mode. So, the AIM-7F Sparrow has to be launched in a hard lock mode. But missiles like the Phoenix or the AMRAAM can be launched in a soft lock mode. A soft lock mode does not notify the enemy target that you're launching a missile at them. This is very advantageous because this can be used to launch a missile at a target, have the missile go to the target, and once it gets within 12 kilometers of the target, it will activate its own radar. This is very, very good because it gives the enemy less time to react to your missile, thus allowing you to launch at a longer distance while still having a relatively good chance of hitting the enemy aircraft. If you'd like to know more information about this, you can check out my previous video, which is a tutorial on how radars work. If you launch a active radar homing missile, you'll see this on the screen. If you see the A and then a number that is counting down, that means it is approaching the target. Once this becomes a T, this means that the target is now being tracked by the missile. This is the point in which you can turn around and run away from the target, and the missile will hit the target and track it all on its own. This bar, which you see, tells you at what range you should launch the missile. The top line is, can your missile theoretically hit that far? Yes. Okay, you can launch the missile, but there's a slim chance it's going to hit. The lower bar is the no escape zone. That means that if an enemy is running away from you, no matter what, they cannot run away from the missile. So they have to notch it or chaff it to get away from it. There's no other way to get away from the missile. The arrow tells you where the enemy is currently. If the enemy is in the no escape zone, it'll be below the bottom bar. If it's not in the no escape zone, it'll be above it. If it's not in the bar at all, that means that's too far away for you to hit it, no matter how quickly it's moving towards you. All active radar guided missiles, if the launching aircraft loses track with the target, will go to the place that the aircraft was going. If the plane isn't there when it reaches the terminal phase or tracking phase, the T part of the timer, if the plane isn't where it was going, so it turned in a different direction, then the missile will self-destruct. If the plane that you were tracking turned and you weren't giving updates to the missile, and the missile doesn't see the plane when it gets to the point where it should, then the missile will self-destruct. The reason for this is so that it doesn't hit an allied aircraft or something else when it starts tracking something. This can be a benefit and a downside in some cases. I've gotten air-to-air kills where the missile flies past the intended target and ends up tracking another plane that just happened to be behind it and ends up hitting it. This can be a downside because if the plane just turned slightly away and the missile doesn't see it, it's gonna blow up before going closer to the target and actually seeing it. Notching. Notching is turning 90 degrees to the target. If the target is locking you, turning 90 degrees to it will make it so that the target cannot track you. This works because how pulse Doppler radars, modern radars, work is a modern radar sends a pulse, measures how long it takes for that pulse to come back, and sends another one. If the plane has moved anywhere towards you or away from you, in the time that it took for that pulse to come back and for it to send another one and for that to come back, then that means that that plane is moving. Then it will track that plane. That's how a radar can tell that it's a plane and not a tree on the ground. Notching means that you are turning 90 degrees to the target radar. That radar can only tell if you're moving towards it or away from it. If you're moving laterally to it, 90 degrees to the radar, it can't tell if you're a plane or a car or tree that's on the ground, because to it takes the same time or very similar time for the pulse to go to the plane, back to the radar, and for it to send another one that goes to the plane and back to the radar. This means, as far as the radar on the plane or missile is concerned, you're building a tree or a car, which means you're not a plane. So as far as it's concerned, you're not its problem. So it's not going to track you. This is great because if someone launches a missile at you and you turn 90 degrees to them and that missile enters terminal phase while you're 90 degrees to the enemy aircraft, you're not there. As far as the missile's concerned, you don't exist anymore. It can't track you anymore. Chaff is a little metal flakes used by your plane and dropped by your plane that to an enemy radar look bigger than you do. So when you drop it, there's a chance that the enemy radar will track it instead of you. This is not a guaranteed success and should mostly be used as a last-ditch effort because it's better to save it for when you need it. Most radars, most modern radars, don't care about chaff and ignore it. So it's probably not going to do much. But if you're lucky, really lucky, the missile will track it instead of you. That's all for this video. As always, have a great time, good games, and get a lot of kills. See you next time.